great maple tree. And as those seeds fall down to the ground, they generate new life. And so the Samara is planting the seed for greater citizen engagement. So please welcome Bob Sutton. Some water, Bob? Okay.
I am so sincerely privileged to be with you today. I mean it when I say that you represent the essence of humanity that gives democracy its only chance, and maybe gives humanity its only chance to survive on this planet. You are to be commended for your commitment. And I got to tell you, that piano guy reminded me of something I forced my parents into, letting me give up piano lessons to play hockey. And now I see what he can do and think, oh, I wish I could do that. That was so well done, so good. And you know, I always come with too much to say. I've been doing 12 or 13 years of this sort of thing, and I'm just another citizen in the community like you are. I'm not an expert. I just want to share some things that I've learned. But one of the things I've learned is what you think is probably more important than what I have to say. And a lot of the research I've read says the citizen voice really isn't being heard in the way it needs to be heard for democracy to be strengthened. But my time's pretty limited, so I want to try a little something here. If what you think matters, I got to take a minute or two or three or four to listen, right? And from what I heard this morning already, we could spend hours discussing things. You're into it, and I love it. So I come up with three questions that can be asked lots of times. Is, in fact, democracy declining or eroding? Secondly, if it is, to whom do you assign the responsibility for that happening? And thirdly, are citizens doing anything, or can citizens do anything? Can you do anything? So you've already made some comments this morning. If we could spend 2 or 3 or 4 minutes at least before we get into my slides. And by the way, I'm a teacher, right? So I brought handouts, and I'll tell you about them in a minute. But just show of hands at the moment, how many of you think democracy is eroding or declining? All right. Unanimous. You don't get unanimity in democracies very often. So my next question is, what makes you say that? How do you measure it? Comment? Okay. Okay. Yeah. Pressure to? Oh, yeah. Okay. Yes, sir. I remember you, Tim. You were a kid in high school when weren't you? Huh? Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Okay. Anybody else? Piano man? Oh, sure.
Well, it's been said a million times, but social media is not only insidious in terms of being exposed to all aspects of an argument. Where I have a problem with it is when a young person is forming their brain cells and their personalities, arguably between the ages of 3 to 6 years old, and then at 7 or 8 years old, being given a smartphone, and then in the very revolutionary years, let's say, in teens and early 20s, they're fully inculcated into all the information they get, even from their teachers. COVID accelerated that, but everything's coming over a monitor now. It's virtual instead of reality.
Mm-hmm.
And really important discussions about seeing each other's point of view are declining horribly.
Mm-hmm. Somebody else, yeah.
One in particular that I just heard about, can you hear me? Is it working?
I can hear you.
In Toronto, if you get stopped by the police because your tail light is out, you will get a breathalyzer test. And they have instituted that because that, they say, is their attempt to improve on the fact that people are drunk driving. So if you get stopped for any reason at all, and so what I'm really saying is it's the reduction in freedoms. We come up with a new reason to do this, to do that, and to restrict people. And to me, that's democracy declining.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes.
I'm very concerned about the family newspaper. Lots of them are going broke, and editorials I find are so informative, and the decline of editorials.
Ah, yes. I do have to say about that one, I'm about to write a letter to the Sarnia Journal. Do any of you follow that newspaper online? It does a remarkable job of what local journalism must do, and it's give our communities identity, a sense of belonging, and a reflection of the real people within the community who are doing constructive things, because so much of the news we get is about what's wrong, and that in itself can take us all down. Yeah.
Yeah, my name's Jim. Another aspect of this that comes to my mind is that there's a lack of recognition of the human family as one family. You know, and if we saw each other as one human family, then we wouldn't treat our brothers and sisters the way that we see them being treated in the world today. And so when we see each other as one family, then we treat each other, you know, then with that comes a moral or ethical foundation upon which we treat each other, and from that springs democracy. You know, and when the underlying foundation of morality and ethic is challenged, then anything is possible, and democracy then becomes confronted. And so I would offer that as well.
You remind me of a line from one of my favorite writers who's mentioned in my handouts. His name's John Ralston Saul. I don't know if the name rings a bell or not. He's married to the former Governor General Adrian Clarkson, and I've met the two of them a few times. But he said, surely the last 100 years have taught us it is the acceptance of differences, not the demand for sameness, that will allow us to function on this planet together. And absolutely, we have to learn that. And I did want to ask, do you feel like you can do anything to enhance democracy, to reduce its decline? Let's do a hand show. How many of you think you can do something? Okay, I love it. A couple of quick comments on what you think you can do. Vote's a factor, for sure.
Engage with people. Be with people.
Creative solutions that aren't condemnation. Creative solutions that aren't in not condemnation, but of challenging their perspective in a healthy way.
And I think that's been touched on earlier about the fact that we have not learned how to communicate well. We know how to confront, but we don't know how to communicate.
Just a couple of quick offerings about that. My wife and I started to do something called 21st Century Conversations and Living Room Conversations in our home. And it was for this very purpose, to bring people of divergent thinking together in a safe space, a trusted space, where we could consult about racism, about democracy, about all of these wonderful, you know, amazing social issues that are out there before us, but to bring people together who may think differently into a space where they can share their ideas without being confronted. It was a place to share and understand why people think the way they do. And so things like that, 21st Century Conversations, Living Room Conversations, they're programs that can be done by any one of us. And they're ways to help understand. You have to understand where people are coming from, you know, rather than, and as Ray was saying earlier, alluding to, you know, that's just, we have to look at why people think the way they do in these periodicals. You know, what is underlying it all? We have to understand. And then from understanding, we can then have meaningful engagement.
This is a great group to spend time with. I would love to talk with you for hours. And what you just touched on, and has been touched on a couple of times, is a theme of some of the things that I've learned. And again, I've got some handouts there. One says, okay, what can I do? as a citizen. And in it is an attachment. I have 20 questions that you can use, if they're useful to you, to stimulate discussions with other people, not about planks in platforms. That's what creates the immediate tension amongst us. It's understanding the bigger process that's so important. So 20 questions you can use just to get to discussing with somebody. And another attachment is diverse perspectives on democracy. And I might have a couple here I could throw at you. Oh yeah, I have the lighter side, the visionary side, and the darker side. And one of the ones from the lighter side is the ship of democracy, which has weathered all storms, may sink through the mutiny of those on board. And then there are some darker ones and the philosophical. In this possibly final phase of human existence, democracy and freedom are more than ideals to be valued. They may be essential to the survival of the human species. And then there's some more back here. But anyway, just use one of those quotes with an acquaintance or friend and say, what do you think about this? And anyway, as I say, I've got lots to babble about, and I wish we could have longer conversations. How much time do I have left, Alan? About 10 minutes? 10 minutes? Okay. A couple of quick overviews. Yeah. One of the things I've learned is that, and I'm sure you understand this, but we have to remind ourselves, process is a change over time, not a moment in time. And we live in an immediate gratification society fundamentally, and we want fast, vivid answers. And if we don't see them, then we think nothing is happening. And when I spoke with Alan's group, the Community Action, Climate Action, Sarnia-Lambton, one of the things I pointed out was that in 1986, 193 countries were using leaded gasoline. By 2007, it was down to 3. In 1970, there were 1,663 substances of 1,000 tons or more destroying the ozone layer. By 2016, it was down to 22, and the ozone layer is healing. Successes over time that don't get noticed. And you might not be aware of this, but about 35 years ago, there were 45,000 nuclear warheads on the planet. Now there are 15,000. That's more than we need, I'm sure, but the very fact that progress is occurring that we never see becomes distressing. And one of the best lines I got about holding government to account was from a person who I have absolute respect for, I've known for years, who said, holding government to account seems to have moved from using healthy skepticism to malignant cynicism. There's an assumption that they're all bad. The only reason they got elected was they wanted to damage us and take our dollars at the same time. And they're all the same. You can't trust them. And I can tell you I've had enough research experience on political figures to know that they're not all the same. But we engage in gross generalizations that limit the potential for conversations. So anyway, with that, I do want to just blow through a couple or 3 slides here. Democracy is a term I found over and over again. Everybody uses, nobody defines, and pretty well everybody takes for granted. And we need to start defining what democracy is and how it works. And I've read research from a number of countries that say fundamentally, citizens do not understand how it works. And they don't really have a sense of their role in it other than to vote. And sometimes I say, maybe we overplayed voting to the neglect of being informed. So I try to suggest our first responsibility is to be informed, and our second responsibility is to vote. But becoming informed can be really difficult. And the other thing I mentioned earlier, we're losing our voice. And so we, hey, my thing ain't working. All right, thanks. So just discussing what democracy even means is an important thing we have to get at. So we have to give our heads a bit of a shake. And when it comes to what to expect from it, one of my favorite definitions is from Bertrand Russell, who said, democracy, it's just a simple system by which we choose who's going to get the blame. And I had a prophet, McMaster, way back in the last century, who said, you young cherubs don't want to believe this democracy thing's all about peace and harmony and light. It's about getting enough compromise we don't kill one another. And a little more seriously, trying to find tentative solutions to insoluble problems. Things like using the Earth's resources, things like the acceptance of sexual differences and identities. We could go on and on and on. It's very complex, and we cannot expect perfect solutions from democracy. So it is the most difficult form of government in the world. And it's finding infinite solutions to infinite abstract problems. Yeah, so democracy will forever probably be complicated, continuous arguments about where society's priorities should lie. Because what we've discovered is that even though we've been a species for over 200,000 years, we just got the right to vote, everybody in Canada, when my father was born. So recent. So democracy is in its infancy. We're still learning how to deal with it and learning how to deal with our own voices. And when it was never structured to trust our perfections. It was to deal with our imperfections. And we could talk at length about the different levels of government and so on and why it's structured the way it is. Yeah, proximate solutions to insoluble problems. And here's my favorite summary of it all. Achieving bearable dissatisfaction. And I think one of the things we have to understand when we talk about democracy is that it's not going to make everything okay so that when we get up in the morning, we don't have anything to worry about. It's never going to be like that, because a couple of writers have said there's no such thing as the will of the people. So we are so different. You've touched on this around the planet. We are so different that having one common will is very difficult unless we can bring it down to the kind of values that you reflect. And I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. Yeah, I'm just going to skip this one. Oh, well, no, I'm not. This is my friend John Ralston Saul. Democracy is the only system that might bring us some form of equilibrium, and its success is dependent upon the engagement of the citizen. And I want to touch with you very briefly on what I see as not a single solution to a complex problem, but the reality that we've lost equilibrium in our societies. And here's 2 or 3 quick notes from me. Here in Canada, 90% of us belong to no political party. 80% of us donate no time, money, or energy to political parties. And half of us don't vote. And in the last federal election, there were hundreds of thousands of tweets sent to candidates by citizens that were either profane, threatening, or sexually explicit. And more political figures are choosing to withdraw from political responsibility because of the very threatening abuse that we as citizens are throwing at them. And I summarize this with Plato. Long ago, Plato said, tyranny arises naturally out of democracy. The other element about, and I could talk a lot more about others, but the other one relates to this. In the average lifetime in our society, we as individuals will spend over 25,000 hours shopping. Research supports that. How many hours will we spend sustaining our democracy? And have you noticed the betting that you can do now if you're watching hockey games and that sort of thing? The marketing, betting companies are spending about $1.5 billion a year promoting betting. In 2023, US citizens placed $130 billion in bets, and Ontario citizens in 1 quarter placed $11.5 billion in bets. So we spend a lot of time in the marketplace, and the book I refer to is called Brandwashed, which suggests that marketing brainwashes us into how we should be busy and how we should value things. So I'm going to fly here because what have I got, about 5 more minutes, Alan?
Two.
Okay, I'm going all the way through these babies. I had so much fun at Western with this one. How do you assign responsibility for democracy? How much to each of these? What percentage? It was a lot of fun. There are a lot of trends of citizen voices increasing. Citizens are seeking ways to have their voices heard more effectively. And there are things happening in Canada, lots of them. And if any of you have children or grandchildren, I think you can see one there is called Civics. And I think I mentioned it in my handout. Google Civics to see the kinds of resources that are being made available for educating youth about how our society works. So I got to get to you, because this is the key for me. Oh yeah, youth. They're my favorite thing. We exclude them from political process. We keep political figures out of our schools. Students in our areas have spent over 500,000 hours of volunteer work as part of graduating, none of them related to democracy. And yet the school system would allow students, with permission of their parents, to help out political parties in elections and so on and so on. They've got to see real life where it happens, where it lives. It happens in their world. So you, what to do, what to do. Discuss process of democracy, not political planks. Learn more. If there's anything I could say, learn a little more, judge a little less, and collaborate. Learn, judge, collaborate, and act. And here's my favorite, and I wish I had more time to talk to you about this. Maybe I'll come back someday. We as citizen voices locally have the best chance of strengthening democracy. And what we have to do is get our political leaders to talk with us about what we want to know and what we want to understand, and to suggest that they, with us, have to explore the question of democracy and how it's functioning and how it might function differently. And just the 2 or 3 things I put up there is just how they communicate, how they conduct campaigns. What do political associations do in the 4 years in between elections? How many of you are a member of a political party? 1. I thought there might be a couple. I brought 3 handouts that I call, that relates to how you can get political parties to start to consult together to educate community. And finally, your own generation coming on. Everybody's heard of take your kids to vote? No, they haven't. They've heard of take your kids to work, but not take your kids to vote. A really simple thing, you can take children and grandchildren with you. And I've had great fun with great nephews and nieces, just driving around town and saying, where did that stop sign come from? Who put it there? You know that school you're going to? Who built that? See that water pumping station there at under the bridge? Well, where did that come from? How did it get paid for? And we did that for about 10 minutes. And then ever since, these kids are going, they're pointing at buildings or whatever and saying, hey, who put that there? How did that happen? Join a democracy group. Google democracy groups in Canada, and you'll see any number that you could join, donate to, if nothing else. And in the end, if you walk away from here today saying, well, that was kind of an interesting discussion, and leave it at that, no action beyond ideas, I'll summarize with this statement. A good idea, not coupled with action, will never occupy a space larger than the brain cell in which it originated. So what we really, really, really need to do is get conversant, caring citizens like yourselves to engage with other citizens, to do some learning, and ultimately to take the action of engaging with leadership. And if you want me to come back sometime, I may have touched with you on this with you before, but there's something called citizen assemblies. You bring citizens together to discuss an issue over time, not just an evening. You know, the town halls, you go there, a political figure has a few things to say, and everybody else has something to say, and then everybody goes home and nothing happens after that. bring citizens together over time to discuss an issue. And I think, did I speak with you about electoral reform? Does that ring a bell? Yeah. Anyway, several local parties, federal and provincial levels, brought their members together and actually studied what electoral reform means. They put together a beautiful 25 or 30 slide presentation that they delivered in community, understanding what does it really mean if we think we're going to change our electoral system? What do the other options look like? What do ballots look like? What do your ridings look like? And so on and so on. 2 meetings, all the partisanship was gone. The joy of learning together lifted them, and they put together a remarkable presentation. So, yeah, if I could say anything, you have amazingly good ideas. You have a capacity to discuss. Use your capacity to act. Thank you, and I hope you can enjoy the rest of your day and feel good about who you are and what you believe.